You're listening to Agile Ideas, the podcast, hosted by Fatima Abuchi. Episode 11, Climbing the Corporate Ladder, What You Need to Know. Happy New Year to everybody listening. Welcome back to Agile Ideas' first podcast of 2019. This year, I have a lot of goals and exciting things in the works that I look forward to sharing with you all, but also hopefully some great content to keep you listening into the new year. Today's podcast is specifically around some of the questions over the years, I guess, that I myself have have had asked, and others that I've asked myself when I too was climbing the corporate ladder. Now, it's not everybody's goal in life or dream or desire to climb the corporate career ladder, but there is a lot of people that do want that. I certainly was one of those people early on in my career when I started working within my first corporate job. My goal was absolutely 100% to climb that corporate career ladder. And at that point in time, this is going back about 16 years ago, I had no prior knowledge or concept of entrepreneurship. I've heard the word and, I knew that it existed, etc. But I didn't really think about entrepreneurship and actually myself being one of those entrepreneurs. I never thought I was creative enough. So for me, when I was growing up and started my career very early on, when I was very young actually, I had noticed around me that those that were in more senior positions of power, management positions, etc., had the opportunity to make the biggest impact and the biggest difference, be it positive or negative. We've definitely, like many of you, have probably seen both sides of the coin. But seeing those, executives and my managers and people that I would see in the organizations I work with, I got to see some of this decisioning that they were making and how those decisions impacted people. And sometimes they were great decisions, maybe other times not so much. And what I realized at that point in time is I'd always been someone who liked to direct and guide people in doing certain activities. For example, when I was much, much younger, growing up, one of 6 children in my family, I spent a lot of time coordinating the birthday party events that we had when we were 5 years old, for example. When I was 5 years old, I remember my sister and I were about a month apart in birthdays, and I remember lining up the children to actually take it in turns to play with the Barbie dolls, for example. So I remembered when I was really young that I enjoyed directing and sort of helping other people on the journey and understanding what they needed to do, whether it's, lining up to play with a Barbie doll to some of the work that I get to do now in Agile Management Office and helping my teams to, create roadmaps and frameworks for companies, tier 1, tier 2 companies, for example. I enjoy that side of things. So early on in my career, just to sort of summarize, I believed that the thing that I wanted to do the most at the time was climb that corporate career ladder, because I felt that by climbing the career ladder, I would be able to have more influence and decision-making abilities to make more positive change and drive better outcomes, I guess, for my customers, stakeholders, and for myself as well in the organizations I was in. That being said, like many of you, I didn't know what industry or company that I wanted to be part of. To be completely honest, when I was, 17, entering the workforce, I actually didn't believe that there was a thing called choice. Going into an organization via a traineeship, for example, which is what I did, that it was really up to them to decide whether they wanted me, as opposed to me being selective of whether or not that company would be suitable. So that's a little bit about background. But I wanted to sort of talk about this topic because I do speak to a lot of men and women. I currently mentor some more junior employees in a company at different companies. I currently am part of a number of different networking groups, and one of the common questions that is being asked and spoken about is not necessarily how do I climb the corporate career ladder, but questions about how to go about understanding and knowing what sort of things would be helpful as you take that journey, either up the career ladder or for those of you going side to side. Either one is fine. So I just thought I would share a little bit about that. First thing that I think would be really helpful is it's also really important to know that depending on whether or not you are a permanent or a contractor in an organization, they are different, very different things. If you're early on in your career, you might not really know the difference so much. If you're, further in your career, like myself, I've been in a situation where I've had both sort of employment as a fixed term employee, which is similar to that of an employee with annual leave and sick leave, etc. if you are in Australia. And then I've also been predominantly a contractor for most of my career. The reason why I wanted to touch base on this is because you need to consider whether you want to be permanent or contractor or do both. And there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't do both or alternate between the two back and forth. A lot of people do actually do that. The reason why I mention this is I believe that through my personal experience, seeing firsthand and also experiences of many other contractors around me, that generally speaking, you tend to get more opportunities for corporate career ladder, climbing and growth as a permanent employee. There are obviously more opportunities that organizations would like to keep in-house, and so therefore, for many reasons, including cost savings, as well as to maintain IP and knowledge in-house, that they would choose a permanent employee over a contractor for specific positions, especially the more senior positions in an organization. I would bet that, 8, if not 9 out of 10 of those are very, very likely to be employees if they're not temporarily filled, rather, by contractors. Most of your senior positions in organizations, I would have a guess that are permanent employee type roles. So the reason I bring this up is because, as I mentioned, you can climb the corporate career ladder both in a permanent or a contractor capacity, but there is a couple of key differences. So as a permanent, as I mentioned, you're probably going to get more opportunities depending on how long you've been with a particular organization. Generally speaking, most organizations will offer vacant positions to permanent employees before they will outsource to contractors and find contract or consulting, staff to come in and fill those. And if you're a contractor or you want to be a contractor or you've been a contractor, never fear, because there is definitely opportunities still for you as a contractor. As I mentioned, I've spent about 16 years now predominantly as a contractor, and I've had amazing opportunities to work in senior roles within organizations over the years, where I've had the ability to take that decision making, the direction and the influence in those organizations. I would argue that if I wanted to be, for example, a CEO one day in one of these companies, most likely I would be required to become a permanent employee. I don't believe there is many employees at all that would be in sort of a C-level position that aren't permanent. So that's just a little bit about permanent versus contractor. Now, just in terms of another thing to consider, depending on where you are in your career. So some of our listeners may be already well established in their career, and so this may be not as relevant. And for those that are maybe early on in their career, it may be helpful to know that when you're starting out, or even when you're midway through your career, there's definitely something to consider around what sort of roles and industry that you want to work in. So we always have opportunities to consider the type of industries we want to work in. You know, whether you'd like to work in banking and finance, or you'd prefer to work in utilities. Maybe you prefer to work in mining and you find mining exciting, or maybe you want to work in retail. Regardless of the industry that you want to work in, do some research about the types of industries that you want to be involved in, for maybe the types of projects that they run and the types of opportunities and roles that they have on offer. Maybe ask around and speak to people in those industries. You can connect with many people on LinkedIn to then make that decision. And also, if you're anything like sort of what I've done through my career, I had a preference to go into project management about 3 years into my career, because I came across a project that I then happened to be involved in and just absolutely loved seeing and feeling the end product of something. So I enjoyed that aspect. So early on, I discovered project management and basically fell into it. And in terms of industry, I had absolutely no preference in what industry I wanted to work in. There is absolutely some industries that I would not be so keen on working in, I'm sure, as you would have some as well. But for the most part, most of the industries, I've had absolutely no reason not to experience them and work in them. So my biggest goal for myself was actually to think about what industry that I wanted to work in. And at that point, not knowing, I decided that I would try to take every opportunity possible to get as much different industry experience as I could. Being in the project management career space, I wanted to experience projects in different industries. And so that was something that was really helpful for me in my career. And if you get an opportunity to spend a bit of time across different industries, then that's something that I think will be invaluable for you over the long term. So some of the other tips that I think would be helpful for you, something that I feel that maybe I could have done better, some things I did do, but maybe, in some way, shape or form, they could be improved. We always can improve, and I definitely can. So one of the things that I would recommend is when you are in your career, no matter what part of your career, whether you're at the beginning, the infancy of your career, or you're much further along the line, or maybe you're changing career paths, think about your network and start to build networks early. You need to build networks that will continue to support you as you supporting them along your career path and your journey. Those networks are crucial not only for your career, but also if you do go down the path of entrepreneurship one day, they can help you in that space as well. The important thing with building networks early is not to lose sight of networks and people that you connect with when working in different organizations. It's important that you maintain some form of contact intermittently as you can along your career, not just when you need something. And that's what I mean about nurturing. So thinking about building networks and early and nurturing them. I'm very fortunate that I still have contacts from my first corporate job. And in fact, my retail roles prior to me getting into the corporate space. So it's important that you build your networks early and nurture them. One tip on that is it's really helpful if you keep a document, or you can write it in a notebook, whatever method that you choose, and actually write down the list of the people that you come into contact with, and maybe a little bit about, what about them that makes you want to continue networking with them over the long term, maybe where you met, the date, etc. And then that way you've got something to recall and go back to, because I can tell you that after working in the space, in the different industries across, the different companies over 16 years, you definitely can't remember everybody. But having this sort of, call it networking book, will help you to maintain that long term. Another thing that I did early in my career and continue to do till this day, even in business, is putting my hand up to take on special projects. Now, there's many instances where someone needs extra help on a particular project, or maybe they're doing a relocation of, people from one floor to another. Perhaps there is some volunteering work coming up, or maybe there's an executive that's got a special goal that they want to achieve and they want you to help write a pack for it. Whatever the special project is, take an opportunity to put your hand up. If you can afford to do that, I highly recommend it, because not only, especially early on in your career, but all the way throughout, will you learn new skills and new experiences by doing these things, but you're helping someone out, and they more often than not will not forget that. Putting your hand up also gives you an opportunity to gain experience that you would otherwise not have. For example, I am currently a volunteer with Beyond Blue, a mental health organization specializing in awareness around anxiety and depression. I joined them for personal reasons relating to my experiences in the anxiety and depression space with my family. And as a result of joining them and sharing my story, I've now been able to speak publicly for about 45 different events over the last few years. So had I not put my hand up to do something like that, I might not have the speaking abilities that I have and the confidence that I have today versus maybe 5 years ago. The next tip is being organized. So I can't stress this enough. If you want to excel in your career, you need to be organized. Because being organized also means that you are more likely to be reliable, because you're not forgetting everything that you're getting asked to do. You're also able to be more proactive than reactive. And that's especially important if you are trying to become, a C-level executive down the line. Being organized is really important, because if you're organized in work and in generally in life, your mind will be more organized, and you'll probably be a little bit less stressed than you are if you weren't as organized. So think about being organized and how you can do that. For example, whenever I am in any particular role, I'm always trying to make sure that I have a clear, task list in any shape or form in regards to the things that I need to do. Not only does this help me explain to others, i.e. my line managers, what I'm working on at any point in time, but it also gives me that track record to help me see how I can, delegate tasks, or maybe put tasks on hold that don't need to be done. So yes, being organized is very, very important. Think of ways that you can be more organized if you are not. Being organized, using your calendar is, I would say, single-handedly the best way to be organized. It just helps to keep on track. So think about scheduling things that you need to do within that calendar, even scheduling reminders to check in on people. For example, schedule times allocated for project work, etc., etc. But being organized is really important, especially as you become more and more senior. You're going to have to delegate more, and being able to be organized will enable you to delegate more in a more efficient manner, but also to make sure that you are staying on top of what you need to do. So think about that as you go forward in your career journey as well. Most of the self-organizational skills that you learn early on in your career will continue to be useful and helpful for the future. You'll just continue to get better if you continue to look at ways of how being organized works for you in both work life as well as your personal life. The other thing as well is, as I mentioned earlier on, I had a vision around where I wanted to go. And some of the goals that I was setting for myself early on in my career was to gain as much different industry experience as I can. And I've been able to achieve that. Being also in a position where I'm looked at for support and assistance, by my colleagues and other employees and people that I work with, stakeholders, vendors, etc. And also at the time early on was about gaining more project experience and therefore more senior roles in the project management space. Within the project management space itself, there are definitely some senior roles. The most senior role I think that I've come across at all, well at least in Australia, is the Chief Project Officer, which was originally identified, I believe, in Telstra. That effectively would be what I would consider the most senior role that I've come across in terms of project management specifically. So if you're in the project management space and you're looking to climb the corporate career ladder, you might transition from being a, senior program director or a transformation director, or to maybe a head of project delivery or a head of portfolio management or a head of PMO or something of that sort. And that would be a good segue from being in the delivery space of projects into operational work, then therefore on a path that will take you towards a C-level role if that is what you desire. Another thing that I still am doing every single day, regardless of where I go, is even at a very early age when I had absolutely no management skills and no management responsibilities, and I in fact didn't even have any sort of management title, I would start to mentally build a team, build a corporate team. I started very early and I thought about people I was working with, people around me, and people that I could see that maybe weren't in my direct team, for one of my colleagues, but maybe in peripheral teams, and how supportive or how proactive they were, how good they were at their roles. And I just would mentally take a note of that, or physically take a note in a notebook, whatever works for you. And then as time progressed and I became more and more senior in some of the roles I was performing, I was able to tap into those particular memories of people, maybe a year or a couple of years before, and actually think about bringing them into my team and actually recruit them for roles in later years of when I was actually in roles. Now, not all the time that you envision a particular team. Like a soccer team, you don't always get to pick the players you want, and they're always going to be available and ready to go and say yes. But at least you can have the conversation, and if someone is available that you're interested in working with, then you can definitely let them know your interest. So build your team and start early. If you come across, this stuff applies for business as well. So if you come across a good bookkeeping experience, or a good accountant, or a good lawyer, or a good conveyancer, or a good, whatever the type of skill set, trade or role that you come across in your career, both in corporate, in your personal life, etc., take note, because finding really strong people can save you a lot of time and effort. And so having a mental note of those people can be invaluable for your future career and or business aspirations to build your team. Another one that I really like to stress about is one of the things that I really try to do from day one is collecting recommendations along the way. We often, when doing a good job, will receive praise and feedback, and sometimes it might be in the form of an email or publicly, whatever the case may be. Often people who feel really grateful for something that you've done, maybe you've gone above and beyond, will often have no problem whatsoever in taking a few moments to write you a recommendation, something that you can file away and collect, and to use in future. Or what I found particularly helpful is to collect recommendations on LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn recommendations don't have to be things that you collect, immediately. For example, when LinkedIn actually came into existence, I had already worked a few years prior to that. And so I actually went back to that network of people and I asked some of them to take the time out and give me a recommendation if they still believed that, the work that I'd done for them was above and beyond, and they were happy with effectively the service that I was providing when working with them in similar teams. So collecting recommendations along the way is invaluable, and especially on LinkedIn these days with the platform with so many millions of people around the world, a recommendation for your work can go a really long way. And then finally, the final kind of tip that I wanted to touch base on is spreading your wings. So spreading your wings in any role that you do in any organization, so you can grow your experience not only in depth but in breadth as well. So think about how you can grow your experience across, the organizations that you're working in, the type of roles that you are doing, and think about what you where you want to go and what you want to do. I mean, it's really good to get experience in general, but ideally it would be helpful for you to have a vision of where you want to go. It doesn't have to be quite a crystal clear vision of this is the specific role that I want to do. But as a very minimum, think about either the industries that you want to be part of, and maybe make a decision around whether you want to be involved in projects, or if you want to go down a particular operational type path. For example, you might want to go down a marketing path or legal, etc., etc. But having the foresight to actually think about that and take the time, as I mentioned earlier, putting your hand up and trying to grow your experience in breadth and depth is so very important, because that's going to actually help you to further develop yourself and your skill set, but also make you more valuable in an industry, in the marketplace where, we're swamped with really good people. To stand out, having that little bit extra experience or knowledge can be invaluable. So for example, if you're in the project management space, maybe you take the time over the years to get experience and knowledge of all the different methodologies that exist, or maybe half of them, or maybe the top 5, etc. That was definitely something that helped me in my career, where I took the time out to understand PMBOK and Prince2 and Agile, etc., etc. So that could be something that could help you to grow your experience in depth as well as breadth. So that is my feedback and tips to some of the questions I've heard over the years, and a lot more recently, or at least in the last few months. So I wanted to share these tips around climbing the corporate career ladder. As I said, climbing the corporate career ladder may be something that isn't for everyone. For some people, it might be something that you want to follow for a period of time, like myself, and then you may pivot, and that's okay. The experience and the learnings that you get by taking those steps towards that will be invaluable nonetheless. So I hope that you have enjoyed the first podcast back for 2019. I am looking forward to any feedback that you have. Please comment comment on any of the podcasts wherever you're listening to it. If you would like to have me cover specific topics in future, please reach out. Happy to always take some feedback. In addition to that, this year we'll be looking at bringing on some special guests in future podcasts and covering topics, various range of topics, and covering a number of different areas, including the experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly in the project management space. So once again, if you would like to be in touch with us, please find us by searching Agile Management Office or Agile Ideas on social media, or you can write to us by contacting via our website, www.agilemanagementoffice.com. I hope that today you've been able to learn, feel, think, or be inspired. Thank you for listening. Please share or rate this if you enjoyed it. Until next time, what's your Agile idea?